Hey guys, it's Angelo, and today we'll be revisiting the Discipline Priest, looking at all of the issues it's currently facing on the World of Warcraft Shadowlands Alpha. The Disc Priest all in all seems pretty solid, but with the removal of Azerite traits, Azerite essences, corruption effects, and all compiling stat multipliers, healing currently does seem lackluster, and the removal of these factors causes some issues in our rotation as well as our talent choices. This causes the disc to face some playstyle challenges, and in this video those will be addressed in detail. Now keep in mind that this is still the alpha, so everything you see is subject to change. If you want an overall first look at the Discipline Priest on the Shadowlands Alpha, then be sure to take a look at the video suggestion popping up at the top right side of your screen now, as in this video right here we'll be taking a more detailed look, so not really explaining all spells and what exactly they do, but rather how these spells are affecting and perhaps causing problems within our rotation and gameplay. Now, if you want to follow the discussion with everything World of Warcraft related, be sure to join our Discord server with the link in the description box below, and be sure to subscribe if you enjoy these types of videos, as I'm seeing that 88% of you guys who are watching are currently not subscribed. I'm glad you found my channel though nonetheless, and I hope that these videos do help you out. Good. Now with that being said, and without any further ado, let's go right ahead and have a look. Okay, so let's start off with the impact that the removal of the entire Azerite system has on the spec. The Heart of Azeroth gives us a lot of helping factors, predominantly Azerite traits and Azerite essences. With the removal of these, the problems begin mainly in the now missing Azerite traits. At the end of Battle for Azeroth, we're currently mostly making use of Death Throes, Enduring Luminescence, and Depth of Shadow as some spec-specific traits, and these three are the ones where their impact of the absence is most noticeable. With Death Throes gone, this leaves our Shadow Word Pain and especially Purge the Wicked a lot weaker than currently, which could possibly make Halo a more viable talent choice again. Enduring Luminescence extended the atonement duration of Power Word Radiance to 70% of the baseline atonement duration, bringing it to 10 seconds of atonement on 5 allies. With the atonement duration now falling back to only 60%, this makes Power Word Radiance feel a little shabby, and lowers its damage conversion ability, especially when paired with the early stages of Shadowlands, where we will be lacking a lot of haste, therefore sacrificing an entire smite within the atonement window, almost 2 actually, since we'll start off again very low on haste. Depth of Shadow is the trait which is the least noticeable, but still noticeable, as Shadow Mend in and of itself won't really be healing for much anymore. Currently on the alpha, this feels a bit problematic, as we'll be doing a lot of filling with Shadow Mend during the early dungeon stages. Now, these issues by themselves aren't too big even though noticeable. The removal of the essences, however, is definitely very present in our playstyle in multiple ways. As the ever-rising tide is gone, our ramp feels a lot weaker than it currently does, as it essentially resembles the ramp before 8.2. With Memory of Lucid Dreams gone, we have no means of generating mana apart from Power Word Solace or its according mana generation talent row, and this could very easily actually see us revert back to the Talent Shield discipline, a talent which we played with during the very early stages of Battle for Azeroth. Conflict and Strife, as well as the Formless Void, were essential stat sticks, especially so during the end of Battle for Azeroth, as they were pretty much constantly active, buffing us with a lot of versatility and a lot of intellect. Now them being removed only strengthens the fact that our healing output currently certainly feels kind of lackluster. Now, whether or not the Covenant abilities, Soul Binds, and the Conduit system will be able to fix these remaining issues, that does remain to be seen, but in order to solve the issues completely, we should stop relying on external power boosters which are only available for parts of an expansion, and then vanish again, but more on that later. Good. Now let's take a look at our actual rotation issues in Shadowlands. These partially tie into the aforementioned removal of Azerite traits, while others are simply carry-ons from one expansion into another. Alright, when looking at our rotation, we see 3 core issues. Firstly, our Penance still feels incredibly underwhelming. Now at the end of Battle for Azeroth, Penance did begin feeling a bit stronger due to the increase of haste, intellect, and mastery, making the penance atonement healing more impactful and its damage more noticeable as well. If you think back to earlier stages of Battle for Azeroth, penance felt like a wet noodle tickling the bosses, but not much more. Since we now lose all of these stats and amplifiers again, penance once more feels very weak. This weakness transcends into talent problems as well, especially with castigation and contrition, since both talents rely on penance to be strong. When penance is weak, so are these talents, essentially forcing us to play other talents in any situation handed to us. Power Word Radiance feels clunky as Enduring Luminescence has been removed, as explained before, while the ever-apparent problem with Rapture makes a return in Shadowlands. Since Rapture is on the global cooldown, when activating it, we have a downtime of 1 global cooldown, which is incredibly annoying because this essentially cuts down on 1 potential Power Word shield we could be applying extra, and on top of that makes us unable to do anything while waiting for that global to come back up. When in a life and death situation, Rapture gives no space for reactional use at all, as it could cost an ally's life when not used preemptively and well timed. Now, all of these issues could easily be fixed, to be honest. Penance could receive an actual damage buff, or a buff to its atonement to damage healing conversion. This would make Penance feel less of a filler and more of a meaningful ability, since it is very core to the Discipline Priest's class identity and thematic. Power Word Radiance could simply be buffed to making the 70% atonement duration it had previously just received from Enduring Luminescence baseline. This would be a nice quality of life improvement and would make the spell and its including healing periods feel a lot less clunky. Rapture, on the other hand, should simply be taking off the global cooldown. Adding an automatic Power Word shield application to a target once we cast Rapture could also be a fix to be considered, as the major issue simply is the fact that we can't do anything during this downtime, and that should ideally be compensated or simply removed. Good. Now let's take a look at our talents. Here we see quite a few issues actually, some tying in with penance, while others are perhaps new problems entirely. So, when discussing talents, let's start off with what we had just previously discussed, and that is the impact of penance on castigation and contrition. Because penance is comparatively weak, castigation gets outcompeted in its talent row by Twist of Fate and by Schism. This is problematic because it narrows down the talent row to only 2 options essentially, which of course goes against the entire point of having a variety of talents at our disposal. Contrition follows that exact same pattern, getting outshined by Sins of the Many and by Shadow Covenant. Contrition has no true value in any situation, not in Mythic Plus, not in low-level dungeons, not in raids, essentially nowhere in PvE. Light's Caress, our new talent replacing Lenience, feels incredibly dull and is an incredibly weak substitution for Lenience itself. Whereas Lenience was entirely passive and, well, therefore dull as well in that sense, at least its effect on the total damage reduction in-game was very noticeable. Light's Caress only has value whenever using Power Word Barrier and is heavily reliant upon everyone actually standing inside of the barrier, which simply won't always be the case. Twist of Fate follows suit in the sense that it is just not good in most situations and is only strong in very specific scenarios, as it gets outshined by Schism pretty much most of the time. This narrows the talent row of Castigation and Twist of Fate and Schism down even narrower, as it currently does not seem as if we'll be seeing much use of Twist of Fate or Castigation in any scenario. Finally, we have Divine Star, which feels very out of place. Now, the fix to Divine Star, in my opinion, is relatively easy, and that is to have its damage trigger Atonement. Unfortunately for Divine Star, it is in a very competitive talent row with Purge the Wicked and Halo, with both having their given use. Divine Star simply gets outcompeted by both talents in pretty much any scenario. Okay, when we take all of these factors into consideration, how is the Discipline Priest looking currently? Well, the Disc Priest is in a good, but still kind of weird spot. Its greatest advantage above most other healers in World of Warcraft remains apparent in Shadowlands, and that is the fact that its damage capabilities are directly tied into its healing throughput. On top of this, we still have damage reduction in our kit, which also puts us on the top of the food chain in most situations. However, while this is our greatest strength, this may very well also be our greatest weakness, because it shuts the spec out of the realistic chance of having internal spec diversity. We are essentially forced to do as much damage as possible in order to increase our healing, and to do so, we are left with little choice and variation concerning our talents, our rotation, or even the stats we will want to be going for. All in all, I do fear that the Disc Priest will have just as little in terms of talent choices as currently in Battle for Azeroth, which is problematic because it makes the entire spec feel dull over time if there are no real chances or real choices given to us. Whether or not this will be the case remains to be seen, and whether or not the Covenants in Shadowlands or the legendary items will fix or change this remains to be seen as well. I'll be sure to cover Covenant abilities in a separate video, as I feel that those are still very subject to change, so adding them to this video would not be a good idea in my opinion. But now, what do you think? How are you viewing the Disc Priest changes in Shadowlands? Do you think they'll improve the spec, or do you think they'll make it worse? I'd be excited to know what you have to say, so be sure to leave a comment down below or join our Discord server. Special thanks to my supporters over at Patreon, and as always, thank you everyone for watching. Leave a like if you've enjoyed this video, and enjoy the remainder of patch 8.3. Now, have a good one my friends, and I will see you all in the next one.